Good, Matt?
Not yet. It's still,
Okay.
we are live.
Thanks, Mr. Frederickson. And to all those attending in virtual land, welcome to our April meeting of the Council Rock Board of School Directors. I'd ask Mr. Hidalgo if you could lead us in the pledge.
Sounds good. Thanks. I'm going to actually try to do a virtual background here so you can say, thanks everybody for being here. All right. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Hidalgo. Madam Secretary, may I have a roll call, please?
I do not see Kapua on the call.
I just noticed that.
I saw her there a minute ago. I think she disappeared. I did just see her.
I don't see her now.
Oh, she's in the attendee list.
She's in the attendee list.
I'll fix that
Okay.
as soon as I can find her.
There with Aaron. Aaron, can I take roll? You're on mute.
Apologies. Yes, you may.
Kapua's in now.
Oh, she's in? Okay. Madam Secretary?
Her mic is on mute.
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
it is?
She's good.
All right. Madam Secretary, may I have a roll call, please? Welcome.
Okay. Denise Brooks?
Here.
Violet?
Here.
Joe Hidalgo?
Present.
Kristen Marcel? Marianne McKee?
Here.
Ed Solomon?
I am here.
Ed Tate? Ed Tate? No. Andy Block?
I'm here.
Mike Thorward?
Here.
Okay.
All right. I will try and keep an eye on the panelist list and note when Mr. Tate joins the meeting. Welcome, everybody. I want to make a quick statement before we get started. Given the unprecedented times that we find ourselves in and the difficult discussions and decisions that will be had and made in the coming weeks, I wanted to make a quick statement to open this meeting. You know, number one, we hope that everybody is safe and healthy. If you've lost a loved one or know someone who's sick, our thoughts are with you. We know our students, our staff, and their families are impacted in so many ways, and for that, we're devastated, in particular for our senior class, the class of 2020. If your livelihood has been impacted, we share your pain. Like I said, these are truly unprecedented times, and we're sensitive to what you're going through because we're going through those same things as well. We're all adjusting to what is being thrown at us in our homes, and this board and administrative team is doing its best to do the same for Council Rock. Dr. Frazier, may I have the superintendent's report, please?
Yes, sir. Thanks, Mr. Block, and good evening, everyone. Likewise, I do hope that everyone is well considering the circumstances, and most importantly, I hope that you and your loved ones are all healthy. I am pleased to report this evening that our distance learning program continues to go very well, and I continue to be quite proud of everyone involved, and that certainly includes all of Team CR, of course, our students, and certainly our parents as well. All roads absolutely continue to lead to the classroom, as our parents know all too well at this point. And indeed, it is a bit odd that our classrooms of today differ so greatly from those to which we are accustomed. And despite those differences, student wellness continues to be at the heart of anything and everything that we do. And tomorrow is our first designated day of enhancing our focus even greater on student wellness and on remediation and enrichment for our students as they continue to navigate these new ways of learning. So again, very proud of everyone. over these first few weeks. We also want to let parents know this evening that we will soon be designating dates and times for students and parents to return to our schools to pick up any of your personal belongings, including any medication that may have been left in the nurse's office. The governor's stay-at-home order currently does extend through May 8th, so we will schedule this opportunity for as soon as it is safe enough to do so after May 8th. I do want to note one agenda change that we have this evening. We had an action item scheduled for this evening regarding the turf field project at Council Rock High School South. The change is that we have moved this particular topic to what's known on our agenda as an item for discussion this evening, with the idea that it will again be placed as an agenda action item next month. It's also important to note, with the current economic recession that's taking place, with, I believe the number is now 26 million nationwide who have filed for unemployment, that we need to, and we are examining every corner and every crevice of our current budget and of our preliminary 2020-21 school year budget. The reality, unfortunately, is that we have a lot of difficult decisions ahead of us from a fiscal standpoint. Just like we reduce our own personal budgets, our own personal spending during these difficult times, we as a district must do exactly the same. Those areas of reduction include eliminating certain purchases that we had planned to make from a curricular standpoint and from a non-curricular standpoint. We are also currently taking a look at some potential staff compensation concessions, more certainly to come on that. And then we need to make the difficult decision to suspend much, if not all, of the long-range capital plan that we have developed. This one pains me because I have been a champion, as many of you know, for air conditioning in all schools by summer 2023. And now one of the projects that we need to suspend for at least a year is the renovation and expansion of Sewell Finestone Elementary School. While undetermined at this point, we very well may need to suspend the Hillcrest and Richboro Elementary renovations as well. And as will be discussed this evening and voted on next month, the CR South turf project does fall into this category as well. Given the severe deficit that we are facing while putting together our 2020-21 operating budget, it unfortunately becomes very difficult to make any decision that requires additional borrowing of funds. Currently, enough funds have been borrowed to complete the Rolling Hills renovation and expansion project and to construct the CR Star Center. Existing funds do not permit the completion, unfortunately, of any additional projects at this time, so additional borrowing in all likelihood would be necessary. The Star Center is important for several reasons, including because if we want to have any chance of completing Hillcrest and Richboro on time, the former RMS, the former Richboro Middle School, needs to be available. And I do want to point out the important reality that those systems in the former RMS, whether it's the boiler system, piping, et cetera, are obviously not going to last forever. We're already on borrowed time with those systems, and the last thing that we want to need to do is sink additional funds into that facility just to keep it operational for a couple of more years. And there's one additional project that had already been funded and contracted that I want to talk about this evening because it's on a lot of people's minds, and that is replacing the turf field at Council Rock High School North. That project was actually approved by the school board on January 23rd, and I feel strongly that this project is necessary at this time because it is already 1 year beyond its typical lifespan, and attempting to go another year without replacement will only serve to place all of our students from both north and south on an unsafe field, and we absolutely must not allow that to happen. Safety always is and always will be our foremost priority. Before I go on, Mr. Taylor, I'm going to ask you just for a moment, please, to speak to some of those safety concerns with the turf field that we've had at North, please.
Sure, thank you. As you said, first and foremost, that field is beyond its expected life cycle of 10 years. We passed the 11th year, and there is a issue with the compaction of the rubber crumb infill mix. We do a annual GMAX test of that field to make sure that the impact testing is performed and that it is safe for students. Each year, those compaction tests demonstrate that the field is becoming more tired, and it is at the end of its useful life, both from a fiber, the synthetic fiber, and the infill. And the best I can explain it is if you took a hard packed dirt area or a natural grass field that became hard packed and simply added a ½ inch of topsoil in that field, it really wouldn't make it any safer. And that is the same thing with the turf field. If you put a ½ inch of crumb rubber on top of what's there, it really doesn't make what's beneath it any safer. So it is absolutely ready for replacement. We are diligent every year. We do what we can to extend the life. We remove all the dirt and debris from that field. And when I say that, it's sometimes 4 or 5 trash bags full of bobby pins and spikes and other debris that ends up in that turf. We brush the field regularly to keep it as loose as we can. But the field is comprised of a 2.5 inch fiber. It's a mat with the fibers that are 2.5 inches long and 2 inches of infill mix. So the grass you see is just the ½ inch fiber sticking out the top of the mix. And those fibers are breaking down and they're really not able to keep that fill as loose as it should be any longer. So that is the unfortunate issue with that. It has served us well. It's a 10-year life expectancy and we are through 11 years. So we are in borrowed time with the field. The other piece of that is today we did complete the removal of the turf from that field. And I will say that we're fortunate in that there are 6 storm drains beneath the field. And if you've ever looked at the field closely within the field of play, you would have noticed those storm drains were starting to telegraph through the surface of the synthetic turf. And what we found was 2 of those drains, which are roughly 5 feet by 3 feet and 6 feet deep, were covered with plywood that had deteriorated to the point where you could crumble it in your hands. We were very fortunate that it didn't fail under the weight of a person. Even though the turf was there and it may have spanned the opening, it certainly would have created a potential injury to an athlete, a student, or even an ambulance that would have to drive onto that field for an emergency situation. So we did uncover something that was even more concerning today. But the bottom line is this is a maintenance project, and much like replacing any floor or carpet, it's a synthetic turf, and we're doing the same here. So that is it for North.
All right, thank you, Mr. Taylor. Certainly appreciate that detail. And board, you know that you'll have an opportunity to further discuss this project if desired later on in the agenda. And again, we will have a discussion item related to the turf field project that has been proposed for South as well. Before we do move on though, I really do want to emphasize to our whole community that any and every capital project that does end up getting suspended will absolutely remain front and center in our long-range capital plan. You can count on us to continue having a discussion about capital planning every October, as we've been accustomed to doing, and again, every spring as we go through the budget process. This means that there will be a regular cadence to these discussions, roughly every 6 months, that will delve into the district's current and projected fiscal realities and consider that financial outlook relative to the capital projects that were needed to be suspended at this time. You can also count on the fact that we will continue with the suspended projects because they are all important. Whether they're turf-based or school-based, they are all important. And once we have the necessary confidence in our financial forecast to do so, we absolutely will be moving forward with these projects. So again, I want to emphasize that this is a suspension of these projects and certainly not a cancellation of any of these projects. From a big picture standpoint, I know that we're all going through some difficult times right now, as Mr. Block said, on many levels. It's important to know that you can count, whether you're a parent out there listening, a student, a staff member, community member, you can count on CR to continue loving your kids up, teaching them up, and all in all, simply doing right by them, as we always have and as we always will. I'm proud. I'm proud of the thousands of meals that we provided to our students throughout this closure, and that we continue to provide, the many donations of PPE that we've made, including creations from our own 3D printers, and really all of the acts of kindness, big ones and small ones. They're all fantastic, that have been prevalent throughout our school community. My hope is that you have much to be grateful for, even during this most difficult of times. And I'll tell you that we continue certainly to be grateful for the opportunity to serve the students and the families of our Council Rock community. Thank you, Mr. Block.
Thank you, Dr. Frazier. Joining us tonight is Solicitor Ms. Aronson. Solicitor's report, please.
Sure. Rob Cox issued a written report earlier this week. We don't have anything to add to it, except for I will announce that an executive session of the board took place on April 8th, and the discussion was potential litigation. And there's another executive session scheduled for April 24th that will discuss collective bargaining issues.
Thank you, Ms. Aronson. And with that, we'll move to public comment. Unfortunately, because a few bad apples had ruined it for everybody, we've moved our public comment to virtual. We've been soliciting those online. We have gotten a significant amount. Mrs. O'Grady will read everything that was sent to public comment. At 30 minutes per the agenda, we're going to stop. If it's only a few more, then we'll read those. If it's more significant, we'll move those towards the back of the agenda so we can get on with the business meeting. And let me just say this. We got a tremendous amount of public comment. We got a lot of comment to the board member email address as well. I know that or at least can say I've read every single one of those. I'm sure my peers have as well. And, you know, I think personally speaking, our sentiments are very, very similar. We want the same things you do. Can't speak for them, they'll speak for themselves. But you know, this is a unique situation we find ourselves in. So, Ms. O'Grady, I'll give you the next 30 minutes.
Very good. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Our first comment was submitted by Stephen Medlar. I apologize in advance for any names that I may mispronounce. Mr. Medlar did not state his area of residence. He wrote, as a South athlete, it is unfair to the players and even parents when we have to go to the North Field as late as 6 on a school night. It limits times for schoolwork and other personal activities. If a South turf was approved, this problem would not occur and make it easier for all players. Our second comment was submitted by Stuart Mickelberg from the Richboro area. Mr. Mickelberg writes, excuse me, my name is Stuart Mickelberg. I have 2 daughters currently in the Council Rock School District. Both of them will go to Council Rock South High School. When the board agreed to close Richboro Middle School and redistrict a couple of years ago so that Council Rock North and Council Rock South each had its own feeder elementary schools and feeder middle schools, you essentially created 2 mini school districts within the greater Council Rock district. Unfortunately, what you did not do was ensure that that there is parity in the facilities and overall student experience in each of the 2 halves of CRSD. It is completely unfair that CR North has a 3,000 seat stadium with turf and CR South has a grass field. It is unfair that Council Rock South students, on the other hand, do not get to have these experiences. The closest they come is attending football games at another high school that is not their own. When CR South games are held at CR North Stadium on top, every high school in this area, except for Council Rock South, has a turf field and or stadium. Central Bucks School District has 3 high schools and each has a stadium with a turf field. I think it is an absolute travesty that a decision was made to construct CR South without a stadium that is comparable to its sister high school, CR North. When the board initially agreed to build a turf field at CR South, I thought it was a step in the right direction to creating parity between the 2 high schools, albeit not a big enough step, as it still left one school with a full stadium and one without. Now it seems this board is reconsidering this decision, which is very disappointing, particularly in light of the fact that it is not reconsidering the project to replace the existing turf at North. I respectfully ask that you approve the project to build a turf field at CR South. Actually, I would like to see the board take this a step further and actually approve a project to not just build a turf field, but a full stadium comparable to the one at CR North. If not, then perhaps you should consider a lower tax rate for CR South residents if you are not going to provide equal facilities. Thank you. Our third comment, or our next comment, is from Brian Bossman of Richboro. Mr. Bossman writes, I have been a Richboro resident for 20 years. I have 4 children who attend 3 different Council Rock schools, Richboro Elementary, Richboro Middle, and CR South. I have 4 children who attend 3 different Council Rock schools. I am once again extremely disappointed in this board's handling of this original promise that was made in 2006 to turf the rocks. Let me remind you that the original mandate was to turf both rocks, plural, not turf the North. In 2006, the CR South and North communities rose up together and fundraised with local South and North businesses to help achieve this initiative. We have been waiting patiently for 14 years only to be snubbed again. And to hear that North is getting its second round of turf installed right now is really disheartening. Where is the return on the South community's investment of time, energy, and money? How long is the board capable of completely ignoring the fact that you are tilting the facility scale at an extreme angle to the north side? Apparently, I need to remind you all that the CR North has a swimming pool, a stadium, and a turf field. CR South has none of the above. Also, don't forget that you also recently closed a middle school on the south side and redistricted 200 plus students from the South community. How long can this board continue to hide behind this false narrative of parity between the North and South when projects as small as South Turf continue to take a backseat to all North projects? In difficult times like this, I understand the need for assessing budgets and feasibility. However, the turf project is the smallest budget item on the docket and is a one-time expense. The turf field will also provide a large amount of revenue from outside user groups renting the fields, which will recoup these costs in the long term. And let's be honest that this is not only the issue that South has. One turf field is not enough for this massive district. The lack of turf field at South greatly affects the North community as well. I can assure you that my friends on the North side find no joy in getting constantly bumped from their own facilities so that South teams can use theirs. Let's not forget how far behind South facilities are compared to other school districts. William Tennant High School is on its second round of turf in the stadium. Truman High School is on its second round of turf in their stadium. Upper Moreland has 2 turf fields. Lower Moreland has a turf field. CB East has a turf stadium. CB West has a turf stadium plus a second turf practice field. CB South has turf stadium, and that school was established 2 years after CR South. We should all be embarrassed by this list. It is also embarrassing when visiting teams come to CR South in the spring to play on fields that have been destroyed from being overused for practice games in bad conditions. It is embarrassing when our sports teams have to cram varsity and JV teams into an auxiliary gym for practice because the grass fields are damp or damaged. Perhaps the biggest embarrassment is in the hallways just outside of the CR South Gymnasium. There is a 4-foot by 8-foot sign celebrating the Turf the Rocks effort. This sign is a constant reminder for all who pass that South got the short end of the stick on that deal back in 2006. You have an opportunity to right the wrongs of the past and provide one small win for the South community in a dark time when our kids could really use something to look forward to. For once, please do the right thing out of respect for the South community and vote to proceed with the CR South Turf Project and fulfill your promise from 2006. Thank you for your consideration. Our next comment is from Cheryl Havers from Holland. Ms. Havers writes, I understand you are reevaluating installing turf at CR South because of the economic, because of the economic environment, but planning on moving forward with returfing north. This is absolutely ridiculous. Should only one project move forward, it should be installation of turf at South. Not only does South not have a stadium or pool, but currently South students requiring turf must use North for all practice and meets. Before North gets returfed, South should have turf installed. I would implore you to move forward with the installation of turf at South as well as returfing North. Should only one project be viable, the board should put the returf of North on hold and move forward with installation of turf at South. It is insane that we have to fight for fairness between two schools. We are one school district and both schools should be treated equally. The appearance of favoritism of North is quite prevalent on all social media at all times. A decision to move forward with returfing can be changed given the circumstances. Please think about the message it will send to all South parents and students if you move forward with North and not South. Turf at South is desperately needed, and I ask that you move forward with the installation at South. Thank you. Our next comment is from Raymond Lyons of the Newtown area. Mr. Lyons wrote to our board members, first off, thank you for helping CR acquire turf. I feel our community needs to have turf at both schools for a variety of reasons. Most importantly, I think that turf is needed to help our athletes participate in sports outside when the seasons are close to getting ready to open. While we can now have fields to train on in December, January, or February, it helps us take a small step ahead, especially as the school district does not participate in summer training. I played college football for Division I program, and the teams that had turf were always at an advantage and they were able to play year-round outside. Thank you for your time. Our next comment is from Ken Mitchell of the Richboro area. Mr. Mitchell wrote, how is it that North has turf and South doesn't? Let's go, people, get it done. This is ridiculous. Signed, Ken Mitchell, taxpayer who wants South with turf. Our next comment is from Timothy S. Vicky of the Newtown area. Mr. Vicky wrote, members of the board, if financial concerns are causing you to rethink the installation of a turf field at South, I strongly encourage you to abandon the North Turf Restoration Project and apply those funds towards the installation of a turf field at South. One turf field is not sufficient to support the many male and female sports teams we have, especially during the spring season, due to the larger number of rainy days there typically are. If you don't want to install a new field at South, you do have another viable option that might have other benefits as well. I went to Arlington High School in upstate New York. The district had a North and South campus, just as Council Rock does. The main difference between Arlington and CR is that Arlington South was for the freshmen and sophomores, and Arlington North was for juniors and seniors. Therefore, there was only one varsity team for each sport. If you merge our schools, you could just repair North's turf and not install turf at South, because there would be half the number of sports teams the district would need to support. One positive is that due to the obvious maturity level differences between freshmen and seniors, it could be better for all that they did not go to the same school. The downside besides the number of sports teams the district would need to support. One positive is that due to the obvious maturity level, the downside, besides the demise of the North-South rivalry, would be that coaches would need to cut many more players because there would be only one varsity team for each sport in a big district. Being cut from a team might be a great lesson to teach kids while they are in high school. But if you don't like that notion, you can still install a turf field at South and keep the school separate. Full disclosure, I have 2 sons who started school at Rolling Hills and now play football, lacrosse, and run track at CR South. One moment, please. I apologize. For some reason, I'm not able to see the names of my.
That's okay. We'll suspend the clock, no rush.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to close it out and start it up again.
If I forgot to mention earlier, Madam Secretary, if you can show that Mr. Tate is in the meeting, joined during the superintendent's report, please.
Okay.
Okay, I'm back on now.
Thank you.
The next comment is from Mark Weinberg of Holland. Mr. Weinberg writes, I first want to take time to thank all of you for listening to the concerns of a Council Rock South athlete parent. The proposal to delay construction of a turf field at Council Rock South makes sense on many levels. However, there appears to be an overriding theme throughout the district of North receiving support and services beyond that of South students. The most recent U.S. News and World Report has North ranked 50 slots ahead of South in the most recent Bucks City, PA high school ranking. The college admission statistics illustrate a plethora of North students admitted to the finest academic institutions in our country. A comparison of admission statistics validates that South is not perceived at the same level as North on an admission basis. The upgrading of turf at North only reinforces the concept that South is not viewed as a priority. From an athletic perspective, I have witnessed the dedication of North coaches who are not teaching professionals, but creating a winning environment. I cannot say the same for certain coaches at South. In an effort at parity, I would recommend that North play field hockey soccer at our South grassy knoll, while South enjoy the use of new turf confines for the same number of years North has enjoyed their stadium. In essence, give the students at South the same opportunity to play on a quality surface. Unfortunately, during this most trying period, the decision to delay South installation will only reinforce the overriding perception of disparity between the two schools. I would strongly recommend that every effort being made to allow the South community and the athletics departments to use this turf field at North so the upperclassmen can at least enjoy playing in front of family and friends on a quality field. I appreciate all of your efforts in trying to make decisions best for the entire school community in these unprecedented times. Your job is thankless. However, I do think there needed to be some discussion on this issue, as the turf is a microcosm of what is evident in any comparison between the two schools. Again, thank you for listening. Mark Weinberg. Our next comment is from Christine Coker of the Holland area. Ms. Coker writes, Dear Board, to say I'm disappointed to hear the board has decided not to turf South is an understatement. The board has committed to providing the students and families at CRS with a turf field. Since you have announced this, the kids and families have been so excited about having the opportunity to play on a turf field at their school. This field is absolutely necessary in our community, not just to the high school, but to our kids. Pulling the plug on this project, especially during this time, is a kick in the face to the families and children who were so looking forward to using this new field. Why would you take that away from our kids, but make sure CRN's turf is redone? As a CR parent, I am deeply saddened and hurt at how the school district treats the children in CRS as less important to those in CRN. If the board decides not to move forward with the original agreement as planned to build a turf at CRS, you will be discriminating against our children and blatantly showing your favor for the families and children at North. In addition, if this is done, the South families will make sure to stand up and speak for our children through the news and social media. Someone needs to stick up for the children in the South. Dr. Frazier and the board are more interested in doing what needs to be done for the North. Council Rock, kids matter. Also, if the reason for this decision is budget related, the community deserves a detailed explanation as to what impact the budget has for the board to change their decision to the turf south. Our next comment is from Shane Cohen. Shane did not list the area of residence. School board members, I am writing in regard to the board's proposal to replace the turf at CR North and postpone installing turf at CR South. As a student at South, I cannot help but feel that this proposal be approved. There is a prevailing sense of favoritism within the board for North. To give our sister school turf not once but twice while neglecting turf for the South entirely is simply unfair. As the student athlete, I can safely state that nearly every school we have played an away game that has turf field while South remains behind the curve. Allow me to present a hypothetical situation that I feel aptly describes the situation. Let's say I'm the parent of 2 children and I buy shoes for only my older child, forcing my younger child to go barefoot. Then, when I go to get the funds to buy another pair, instead of purchasing shoes for my younger child, I buy my older child a new pair. If this were the case, it would not only prove my favoritism for my older child and my poor money management. This is exactly the scenario that the board is dealing with, and both their kids need shoes. Thank you for your time. Our next comment is from Jeff Stedman of the Newtown area. Mr. Stedman writes, I would like to urge you to please continue with the already approved plans for a turf field at CRS. As a CRN resident, I find it appalling that some kids in my district do not have access to their own turf field, while others do. In addition, many other high schools in the surrounding areas have what has become a common amenity. Council Rock is a great school district in so many ways, but it is hard to consider it that way when it cannot provide some very common and basic amenities for all its students. It is understandable that finances are an issue during this time and major renovations need to be put on hold, but the turf field is a relatively small financial impact compared to other major renovations and is long overdue. Lastly, during these times, some positive news could be a good morale boost for parents and students who are struggling with distance learning and missing their friends, taking away something that was so desperately needed and wanting to add to that struggle. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Ms. O'Grady, if I could just ask the panelists on the board just to mute your lines to avoid background noise. Thanks. Sorry, Ms. O'Grady.
Yes. Our next comment is from Chris Can of the Churchville area. Chris writes, good evening. My name is Chris Can. I have resided in the CR school district for over 20 years and have 3 children at CR South. Sports and outdoor activities are essential for healthy children, and I was happy in 2006 when the Turf the Rocks initiative was approved, as turf fields at both North and South would provide additional capacity for children to participate. I was pleased when the turf field was installed at CR North in 2010, but I'm disappointed that you are now proposing to postpone the same for CR South. This is unfair to children at both schools. who have to share a single facility, which is too small for a school district of this size. I would ask you please to reconsider and prioritize funding for this project, which can help children lead more active and healthier lives. Thank you for your consideration. Our next comment is from John Green of the Churchville area. Mr. Green writes, all, I wanted to take a moment to voice my support for the continuation of the turf project at Council Rock South. I'm a parent of 2 South students. First, my son was a 2019 graduate. He played soccer for a few years while at South. My daughter is a current freshman. She played field hockey in the fall and made the lacrosse team in the spring, which seasons was canceled. It has always been my impression, and most certainly that of my kids, that we are always a guest at North. I know this is just a mindset and we are all one community, but it is the reality of how it feels when you don't have something that is truly your own. Home games never quite feel like home games. In order to consider to build quality athletic programs, facility improvement is a must. The new turf at South would allow far more student athletes time to train and practice on turf at both schools. I know from recent experiences that field home headaches that come from along with it due to poor weather or poor field conditions after a weather event. Turf is almost always playable. New turf at South will also benefit the community as there are various programs such as Cruza Soccer that are always looking for more turf time. I am not aware of the finances, but I am sure they are willing to pay for said time. I would ask that you recognize the benefits to the students of South of having a turf complex that they can truly call their own, and also the benefits to the community in general. Please allow for the continuation of this very important project. It has been delayed for far too long. Thank you for your time and consideration. Our next comment is from Lauren Dillon of the Holland area. Lauren writes, hello, my name is Lauren Dillon and I have a freshman at South who plays field hockey. I also have a son at HMS who intends to play lacrosse when he enters high school. Seeing how my children's athletic program's development sits behind North's is very frustrating. Being bused to North, looking for rides home after practice, working around North's schedule because they know they are guests there is not ideal. We have been waiting and are very interested in your voting to make this happen. Our next comment is from Lori Jones of Ivy Land. Ms. Jones writes, I am writing to voice my opinion on keep the vote to turf South Fields. I can't believe we are still having to fight this to happen. This was budgeted for and should not be defunded. Don't give me the excuse of the pandemic. My daughters played soccer for South, who, by the way, had a better team than North. They played at a disadvantage in the Suburban 1 League when most other high schools played and practiced on turf, which takes the game on a whole different level. Our teams can't play on rainy days, and in one season, they were playing 4 games a week to get the season in. That's not good for the athletes and their bodies, and missing classes as well. As a taxpayer in the district, we deserve the same benefits as South as North taxpayers get. We put you in this position to do the right thing for the students and community. On another note, my daughter was a Courier Times Player of the Year and First Team All-Star State, giving some good recognition for Council Rock South. She deserves the same opportunity to perform at the highest level that the athletes at North get. Do the right thing. Our next comment is from Mark Brundage of Churchville. Mr. Brundage writes, board members, I reach out to you as the current president of the Council Rock Youth Lacrosse Association. I understand that the commitment to put a turf field at CR South is under discussion again tonight, which is very unfortunate for several reasons. Our youth program, like most youth programs in the district, is comprised of both North and South kids, which is fantastic to develop the overall sense of our full community and district. All the kids know if they are going to North or South, but they work together throughout their youth as a team to develop their meet and goals. So while they have a sense of the community as a whole, they also know that they have future identity that they eventually graduate into. Part of that future identity is thinking about competing at the high school level and representing their school. Having a turf field, a home field, is something all young athletes can dream about. Taking this field away would be allowing half our kids this opportunity, just half. That simply is not fair. Our community is split between two high schools, which we all understand has its challenges. There has been considerable effort from everyone over the last few years to redistrict and create parity. Many of our families were affected by this. Many families have now had to shift their future identity one way or the other. While this has been hard for many people, settling into the future identity over time should work out if there is parity between them. To potentially now say that the North Turf Field project will move forward and the South is to be scrapped is essentially a slap in the face to half of the community. Half, sports, and all their meeting places are going to be a very significant aspect to this community, now more than ever. Go through any town and the field, and the high school is one of the most prominent places in that community. Our community together as one, but divided into two. Why should one half always feel like they have to share their identity with someone else, while the someone else always has to feel like the guest? Do the right thing for this community and watch how the identity of both the North and South grows from this project. Do the right thing. Our next comment is from Victor Pumo from the Holland area. Mr. Pumo writes, board members, the purpose of this email is to relay my concern that the turf field project for CR South is potentially not going to occur. Quite honestly, this is ridiculous. As a parent of two soccer players and a former player myself, I find it incredibly unfair that South has had to share facilities at North since its inception. Example, football stadium and pool. And now it's again potentially getting the short end of the stick when it comes to turfing the track at South. Please make sure this egregious oversight does not come to fruition. Best regards. Our next comment is from Joanne Williams of Richboro. Ms. Williams writes, as a taxpayer in Northampton Township, I find it incredible that the turf has not been installed at Council Rock South, yet it has been at North. I respectfully request that you reconsider your decision and install turf at South so that these students may benefit as their North counterparts will. Our next comment is from John McGinley of Holland. Mr. McGinley writes, as I write this email, I have heard that the board is tabling the discussion for turf at South. If that is the case, find a way to get the turf project at South completed. Get community volunteers, get organizations involved, whatever it takes to get this done. We are clearly in difficult and extraordinary times. This is not the time to slip in a last-minute change while your community has other concerns. You committed to turf at South. Keep your promise to the students and families in the South End. To renovate turf at North and again leave South out in the cold is not fair or equitable. It is also disheartening. We went through Turf the Rocks. North has a turf stadium 14 years later, no turf at South, and North is getting a new turf field. For the past 20 years, I feel like I have been living in two separate school districts, the wrong side of 413. From what I understand in talking to friends and colleagues in the district, everything at the high schools is supposed to be the same. Curriculum, grading, activities. Why does this not appear to the athletic facilities? Do the right thing. Keep hope alive for the kids at South. Enough has been taken away from them recently. Go forward with this turf project at South. Give them a place for their PE classes. Give them a home field for football, soccer, lacrosse, field hockey, the marching band, and cheerleaders. Give them the same type of home field the kids at North have. Baseball and softball can practice outside during the wet spring preseason as well. Do the right thing. Ooh, I just lost my, one moment, please.
All right, Ms. O'Grady, that's 30 minutes. So I was going to let you keep going, but given you just lost it, I'll give you a break. You probably want to get some water or something.
Good.
But appreciate that. For anyone watching the agenda, we'll come back to read the last 11 comments that we have after the Facilities Committee update for Mr. Salomon and just prior to board comment. So moving forward with our agenda, I'm going to ask Mr. Bilick to read the motion for G there, approval of minutes from the special meeting on April 2nd.
Thanks for the heads up. Just give me 1 second. Item G, where are we? I'm sorry. Approval.
G, right under public comment.
I move to approve the minutes of the special meeting of the Board of School Directors on April 2nd, 2020.
I'll second it.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Salomon. Do I hear any objections? All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any against say no. Motion passes with unanimous consent. And with that, we'll move to the items for discussion. I think Dr. Frazier did an excellent job framing up the predicament that we find the unfortunate predicament we find ourselves in last week. And you know, at last week's meeting, I asked some questions about how realistic the plans for South and our entire capital plan were, given the expected financial position over the next 18 months, as well as the unknown. You know, it's just a lot to take in at that meeting. You know, we just gotten the bids back. We had just gotten our first view of the potential impacts of COVID-19. So although there's more work to do in the near term, you know, as I sit here today, it's a real possibility that, you know, consistent with what Dr. Frazier said, that we're going to need to suspend our full capital plan. Hopefully not for long, but, you know, due to COVID-19, our ability to hold regular public meetings has been significantly impacted. So, you know, our ability to engage in person, obviously, our ability to have live public comment, our ability to have a regular cadence of meetings. We were originally scheduled to accept or reject bids on the turf tonight. But you know, with only a week to consider those bids in the context of our most recent budget meeting, and after careful consideration and reading through the community feedback, it became clear that rather than make that decision tonight, the board needed some public discussion to help the community understand some of the considerations that each of us are struggling with. Additionally, it's important that this not become a north-south issue. We can, and I can certainly appreciate the history and all the baggage and frustration and emotion that comes along with that. And I'm sure my peers do as well. But this is not about North and South at all. It's about the fact that we're in a global crisis and we need to do everything that we can do to ensure the sustainability of our school district and avoid having to cut programming, extracurriculars, and jobs that are associated with those things that are needed to maintain our high standard of education. I personally agree with almost every bit of sentiment in the emails that we received and made many of those same points in advocating for this project originally. I've been after this since redistricting, when I really got a feel for the disparity in the North and South. And I was really proud when we were able to put the funding and the votes together to pass this. And my hope is that it's still going to happen sooner rather than later. But it's our job as board members to make decisions in the context of the current environment. And it's just really unfortunate. So, you know, we're going to do our best in this virtual environment to be as transparent as possible, completely transparent, to hear what folks are saying in the community and consider that. But at the same time, it's really important that we do what we have to do based on the best information that we have to keep this district viable. We have no idea what moves the state will make. We hear state governors who are needing funding. We know our state budget is going to be in rough shape, and that will likely mean cuts, and that could impact education. And those are types of things we don't even know today. So it's a big, tough, complex project. And, you know, personally, it's hard to go through this because I'm sure most of my peers, if not all of them, agree with every bit of sentiment that we're getting. So what we're going to try to do tonight as a board is share some comments and points of view, potentially ask any questions. Dr. Frazier noted that this will come back to the board at likely the next meeting or sometime in the next couple of weeks or months as the budget process itself evolves and we get tighter information relative to the projections for the finish of this year and for the outlook for next year. So that being said, what I'd like to do is turn it over to my colleagues for comments and our questions. And what I'd ask, just so we don't talk over each other, is if you could raise your hand, and this goes for all of the panelists, just raise your hand there and I'll call on you and we can do it that way. Who wants to go first? Ms. Brooks.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Andy, for summarizing so well many of the things that I have been thinking about relative to all of this. I think it's important to say that I was part of a majority of this board favoring the turf. And so a lot of the emails that have come in have used language like you're reconsidering the decision on the turf, or you decided not to turf south, or you're pulling the plug on the project. And for me, my commitment to turfing south has not changed. I have not reconsidered the decision to move forward on the turf. What I am doing now is reconsidering the timing of how we can do this. And a week ago, when we had our joint committee meeting, and it's a fair point to say that in a non-pandemic world, that meeting would have taken place several weeks ago, and we may have had more time to get additional information between then and now. I have shared this with many members of the community that I've spoken to and some of my board colleagues. Emails were coming in about the turf field, and I walked in, well, didn't walk in because I'm sitting here, but I went to the last week's meeting, and in my mind, I still believe that I was committed to the time frame for what we had on not only that project, but also Salt Limestone, and I mean, all the pieces of our capital plan. I wanted to believe and be optimistic that we could continue that because those were important things for our district. When I listened to the budget information that was provided to us, I quite frankly was speechless and sad and fearful because that meeting presented very stark numbers and possibilities where the impact for our district would be so profound in terms of cuts to programs, curriculum, staffing, and it's, the information is presented in this, best case versus worst case comparison, and the reality is likely somewhere in between and not at the extremes. But the picture is so unclear and the stakes are so high for our students that for me, again, the decision is not about whether we should move forward with these projects, but how can we move forward in a time frame that does not put our core mission at risk and impact, create a much larger impact for the wide audience of our community. And so for that reason, I really appreciate the notion that we will have a little bit more time to get information from our finance director and to really understand what our budget implications are in the year ahead with a little bit more clarity and a little more specificity so that it's not just these wide ranges. But I have to say that I'm really nervous and very worried about what the prospect is because the financial impact is real. We are all feeling it, and the school district is not immune from that. So again, for me, it is a reconsideration of timing only and not the commitment to move the program forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brooks. Again, board, if you'd like to make a comment, please raise your hand. Oh, somebody's raised it. Where is it? Nope. No hands raised.
Yeah, there is one literally raised.
Oh, okay. Mr. Tate, you want to jump in there, Mr. Tate?
Yeah, please, thank you. I'm glad Ms. Brooks brought up the financial projections that we got from Mr. Stone last week. I'll get to those in a minute.
Hey, Mr. Tate, if you can make sure you speak into your mic there.
Yeah, I am. Can you hear
thank you.
me?
Yep.
All right. I just want to say that I'm going to get to the best case and worst case that Ms. Brooks talked about in a moment, because I looked at the video again today. But I just want to say my personal commitment to this project is unchanged. More than 2 years ago, behind the scenes, when we were told that this project looked unaffordable, I was saying to folks that we had to find a way to make this happen. It's a matter of parity, and it's a matter of fairness to our athletes and our students and our staff. But right now, I think it's time to slow things down, figure out where we stand financially. And let me just run through a few figures from last week's meeting that Mr. Stone gave us. Ms. Brooks talked about best case. Next year's best case was projected, and this was a very detailed projection. Best case was a deficit of 4.5 million. Worst case was a deficit of 16.7 million. This year, we're looking at a possible deficit in the range of 6.6 million, a revenue decrease of 6.6 million. Alone, we could see a decrease in the earned income tax of $3.5 million. When I joined the board, we had been in the position of cutting more than 40 jobs. And these jobs particularly impacted special education. It took us more than 2 years to catch up and restore those positions. I don't want to be in that place again. I think we have to take a month at least to evaluate where we stand financially. And unfortunately, we have to put this turf project on hold. That's my position.
Thank you, Mr. Tate. Other board members wishing to make comment, please raise your hand in the box. Mr. Bialik?
Yeah, I just briefly want to say that I encourage, and I appreciate all the correspondence from everyone who sent an email. It does help us to know what the feeling is from the folks out there in our community for sure. I do encourage everybody to look at the committee report or the committee meeting from last Thursday. And I think that'll help people. I think it is important to note that, as people have said, it's not that we're reconsidering the project. It's that it's going to be done at a different time. So the semantics are very important there. But when we talk about deficits, these potential deficits are real and they're frankly enormous. So I'm afraid that Mr. Stone's projections, as I've said, are maybe too conservative on the downside. We're looking at 20 close to 30 million people out of work. A good representation of that is in Council Rock. I know many people who have lost their jobs or who are working for half pay if they're still working. And then you have the issue of the funding of the project. So the way we fund projects is to go out and borrow money from investors via municipal bonds. It's a very, very difficult market for municipal bonds, and our financial advisor from PFM had suggested that it's a terrible time to go out, and maybe I'm putting words in his mouth and saying the terrible time, but I've seen it and I see it every day. So with bond issues being as sporadic as they are, we just don't know where pricing is going to be. So it's an irresponsible time to go out and put debt on the books for Council Rock when we don't know what that debt's going to look like. So it's very much a perfect storm. And, there are a lot of people that are behind this project. And for those people, I think that there should be some solace in the fact that the majority of the board did support it, and that I'm sure it will continue at some point. The question is just when. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Bialik. And from there, we'll go to Ms. Marcel.
Thank you, Mr. Block. I just wanted to agree with a number of the comments that were stated tonight. As Ms. Brooks mentioned, this was something that I think a lot of people were supporting, and we were just moving forward. And then last week's report, joint committee meeting, there was just a lot of and very scary news from a financial perspective. And so I think that for me, it's we all know that a lot of things have changed. The world has changed, in the last 5 weeks, but I would say that my commitment to doing the turf field at South has not changed. I really am looking forward to figuring out how we can make this happen. But we have to obviously be, financially prudent and make sure we're doing it the right way, so we're not harming any other parts of Council Rock. But the commitment is definitely, I hope that we can be creative and move forward in a positive way.
Is that your full statement there, Kristen? You're freezing up. We'll have to get you some better internet.
It must be that my daughter is using all of our Wi-Fi power.
Good, she's doing it. Let's see, Mr. Hidalgo, and then we'll go to Dr. Thorwart and then Ms. McKee.
Hi. So I guess when we voted on North and South a while ago, I think some dissenters on the turf, and it was mentioned, we are financially looking at a tough future even before the COVID crisis came in. And we all knew that there's a financial strain on our budgets and our revenues and our expenditures. So even before this happened, we knew that there was an issue with our financial future as a school district, yet we still had to do the North Turf because of safety issues, and it's at its end of its lifetime. And the decision where I was making was, well, these guys at the South, as the public comment could do a much better job than I can in explaining why they wanted a turf. I was a go for it, even though I know from a financial standpoint, we really can't afford these things in a sense without putting strain on our system, our financial system here. So I looked at them as tied together. I looked at these projects as one, even though they were separated. And and I think I commented back in the day that, well, these one-time expenditures aren't going to fix the problem, whether we do or don't do it when you look at over the long period of time. And so I'll stop with that notion, but fast forward to now where we already had the bids for North. It's set to start the day after graduation. We're waiting for the bids from South to come in, and then a global pandemic shuts everything down. And all of a sudden, in the back of your mind, we have to take a pause and look at everything that's going on and what we're doing, and it's going to have an impact on our future expenditures and timelines and our capital plan. So then we decide that before we had a chance to look at everything, that we would push up the North plan from the day after graduation to April 20th. And I thought that we should wait and reconsider everything like we are now. Because if we look at the safety issue of North, well then is it possible that we could have just done the turf and addressed that and not the scoreboards and the track and all the rest of that, just like we're reconsidering everything else? So my opinion was to let's not go on the 20th and maybe roll the dice with seeing if they would still be able to come in at the end of graduation. Maybe the social distancing would be lifted by then. maybe there's an opportunity there for us to adjust the contracts because of this global crisis. I don't know. We didn't get a chance to hash it out. It was quickly decided that we would continue, that we would push this up to April 20th. So that, to me, even though some people might think it's not a domino effect, I truly believe that when I voted for South, it's because we gotta keep that parity and that fairness. And it's absolutely nobody's fault on this board or in the administration of what's going on in the world. And we all live in this absolute new world, which is scary. But I truly believe we're going to be okay in the long run and even in the midterm. But we got to get through this. So it's a struggle for me to say, no, we're not going to do the turf at South when we've already committed in like this to continue without any analysis of what we could actually do to cut that project down lower. So maybe we don't need to do the track, or we hold off, you know, and divide this thing up. And then to also look at doing that for South. So I'm open to continuing the project. It's a tough situation. The timing is terrible. And, but nobody on this board's abandoning it. And I'm thinking to myself, it's a revenue generating investment. And it actually will improve the safety at South, because then we'll have a safe field. We'll now have 2 safe fields for the students to play on. Especially you got JV football that still plays on that hard field in the middle of the track. So whatever we can do to get that done. I think the other issue that was mentioned, that the cost of waiting at North, let's apply that to South too. How much is it going to cost for us to wait to do it if we are going to stay committed to it? And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hidalgo. Dr. Thorwart?
Yeah, I'll be brief. The board has hashed over most of the issues here. I'd just like to talk, there were some comments about commitment, and I personally haven't given up on this. I think by pausing and waiting a month, we may see more clarity here. I haven't given up. I expect this project to go forward, and I expect it to go forward soon. I'm not going to be vague. I expect this to be the next project we do, period. I don't think we can do anything else. We promise this to the community, and I expect to deliver it to them. If we can't do it right now, I expect us to do it as soon as possible moving forward. That's it.
Thank you, Dr. Thorwart. Ms. McKee.
Thank you. I'll also be brief, as my board colleagues have really voiced so many of my concerns and my commitment for this project. And I just want to take the opportunity to thank everyone in the community who has reached out to us and shared their thoughts and feelings. There are some very strong opinions on this topic, understandably, and I appreciate everyone's advocacy for our students. Finally, I'll just say right now, my most immediate concern is with maintaining programs, maintaining staffing. I don't want to see any of that negatively impacted by our current finances. And again, while South Turf remains a priority, I believe for all of us, and it will happen, I don't want to see cuts to staffing and to program, and that concerns me at the moment. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. McKee. Mr. Salomon?
Thank you, Mr. Block. I'll attempt to be very short if I can. I just want to say on behalf of my colleagues, you know, I lost count at about 125 emails in the last 48 or so hours. It's rewarding to be a school board member. It's rewarding to be a school board member and get feedback from your community. I always find it hard to make decisions without listening to your community. And you came out and you made a lot of good points. And as my board colleagues have stated tonight, we were hit with a brick wall last week where we saw some numbers that hit, you know, above $10 million deficit. As we were speaking, and we can't compare apples to apples, obviously, but Philadelphia just announced that they are looking at a possible $1 billion deficit in 5 years for their school district. This is the reality that we live in today. And I also want to thank the board, Dr. Frazier, for being able to discuss this highly fought for topic. Initially, we were going to vote on something that I wholeheartedly felt that we needed to take a break and discuss where we're coming from to our tax base. And we did this, and we're doing it, to the degree that I think when you hear what we are about to enter, as a parent, as a taxpayer, you have to take a pause yourself and question turf over programs, staff cuts, and a deficit for many years to come. I fully support this turf product, this project. I also oversee the Northampton Girls Softball Organization, 200 girls that lost their entire softball season to this pandemic. And some of the parents that wrote in, your 1 or 2 daughters are on my softball team. They're also soccer players. This is not where we want it to be. When this bid went out in February, we anticipated numbers to come back, and we moved forward with this project. School closed in March. The bid came back last week, and here we are today. I support this. I will continue to support this. To Dr. Thorwart's point, I'd like to see this go next. I want to be sure that we can do what we need to do for the kids in terms of education first. And to me, that's the most important thing. And I will add, I have a senior as well who is in the middle of all of this. It's important to me that we do this the right way. And I applaud the board for taking a step back and putting together this discussion piece so that our tax base and our families can hear where we're coming from. Thank you, Mr. Block.
Thank you, Mr. Salomon. Are there any more comments on the board? So with that, I appreciate my peers' comments. Hopefully, the folks that are interested, and there's over 60 people on the line here. Many of them folks that we've gotten emails from, many of them folks that I know personally and respect, and that makes this all the more difficult. And it's just a tough situation. But hopefully, the public understands that the board, for the most part, and again, I can't speak for them without a vote, but you've heard their comments. This is something that we want to do, that we intend to do, and that we know we make that decision based on every reason that it should be done. We also hope you understand that this is not a North and a South thing. I completely understand the perceptions, the optics, and the history, and the frustration, and wouldn't try to tell anybody to feel any differently myself. What we owe you now is the same look that we are getting as the information as it evolves, so that you can understand the decisions each of us have to make in the vote that we have to cast at some time in the future on this and the rest of the capital plan and anything else that's going to be potentially impacted by this. And it's my hope that along with the administration, we can do a very good job of this. So at the end of the day, whatever happens, people might not like it. People might be frustrated with it, but at least people will understand. And again, doesn't mean people have to agree. I wouldn't say that, but it's my hope personally that we can provide the same information to everybody that we're looking at. And please understand this is a difficult environment that we're trying to meet and work in to make sure that it's all done within the Sunshine Act and in public. So that being said, in terms of next steps, I'm asking Dr. Frazier, and you and Mr. Stone, feel free to give me a little direction. You guys are currently, as part of the budget process and finance committee, working up more detailed numbers. We've got our next joint meeting coming up. Is it feasible to ensure that the board has information prior to that and that we can stage another discussion on this in the context of that information at our next joint meeting?
Mr. Stone, you want to take the lead on the answer from the financial end of things?
Certainly. Yeah, we are, every week that passes, we get a little bit more clarity around our financial situation. So the intention at the May 7th committee meeting is to talk about the budget and budget reductions that have been made to this point, and just continue to refine that overall picture. And yes, we can certainly keep the board apprised of every development that we know about with respect to being able to fund our operation and our capital plan.
Okay, so what I would suggest is, the sooner the finance committee, and you can get that information to us in advance of that meeting, so you can get a feel for whether a board majority is prepared to have a discussion and a vote, as opposed to further discussion would be great.
Very good, can do.
Excellent. All right, with that being said, we're going to move to the Education Committee, and I'm going to hand it off to Mr. Tate.
Thank you, Mr. Block. Education Committee last met as part of the joint committee meeting on April 16. The most lengthy discussion had to do with distance learning. As I noted earlier that day, Dr. Fraser had sent an email informing us that, in his words, distance learning is evolving. And my reaction was, that's a good thing. It's new territory for us all, and it should be evolving and continually refined. And that's what we've been hearing. And the reports have been very positive. So congratulations to our teachers and administrators and staff for taking on this big challenge. The Education Committee will meet next as part of the next joint committee meeting, which is May 7th. I have a motion. I move to approve consent agenda items B through D as contained in the attachments to the agenda.
Second.
I think there's a second from Mr. Bialik. Are there any questions? Do I hear any objections? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any objections, say nay. Motion passes unanimously. And Mr. Tate, if we could move to letter E, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Block. And after the motion, I'm going to ask Mr. Sanko to speak to this. I move to approve the revised 2019-2020 school year calendar as contained in the attachment to this agenda.
Second.
Second from Mr. Bialik again. Mr. Sanko?
Yes, so on the calendar that you see in front of you, originally April 28th was slated as a day off for students and 10-month employees, as it was primary election day. And given the current circumstances and the distance learning model that we are in now, we would like to recommend to make April 28th a day on for students and teachers.
All right. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Sanko? Are there any objections? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say nay. Motion passes with unanimous consent. Ms. Brooks, if we could get the Bucks County IU update, please.
Yes, thank you. So, I mean, in the news, we hear a lot about entities using 3D printers to help fabricate personal protective equipment. And the Bucks County IU has used its mobile fab lab that has, should be making the tours of schools right now for a different purpose. So they are working to produce face shields and have been producing in excess of 200 face shields per week and distributing it to relative entities across the area. The IU is also instrumental in other ways in helping get resources to areas of our community. The Bucks County Emergency Operations Center was recently contacted by City Line Construction Company, located in Allentown, Pennsylvania, because City Line Construction made a very generous offer to provide EPA-approved surface sanitizing solution to be used as a germicide in the ongoing efforts to fight COVID-19. So the director of the Bucks County Emergency Services reached out to the IU to see if they could help coordinate the distribution of this very generous donation. On Tuesday, April 14th, the IU safety team, along with trucks and personnel from Centennial, Central Bucks, Quakertown, and the Chamonix school districts, arrived in Allentown and collected 2,500 1-gallon containers of this solution. And the sanitizer was then transported by those school districts to different warehouse locations for storage and future distribution to first responder agencies and public schools in Bucks County. A good portion of the IU meetings also just talks about the implications of things going on in Harrisburg and how it impacts our schools. We talked about how this past weekend, or actually earlier this week, thousands of protesters descended on the Capitol in an effort to push Governor Wolf to roll back his order to closing non-essential businesses and lifted the instructions that dictate that residents stay at home. More than 33,000 confirmed cases of COVID exist in the state, and according to the press that was there, the protesters ignored state guidance to maintain 6 feet distance from each other and wear masks at all times. So it was described as a bit of a crazy scene there. But nonetheless, Governor Wolf and Health Secretary Rachel Levine stressed the importance that the measures had in minimizing the damage the virus was causing across the state, while also expressing sympathy for the plight of business owners and people's right to protest. The governor had laid out plans to slowly open some commerce in the state. This week, he's planned to sign a bill allowing car dealerships to resume online sales and some construction projects to move forward. As Dr. Fraser had mentioned earlier, the stay-at-home order was originally set to expire on April 30th, but has been extended to May 8th. In other budget news at the state, Pennsylvania reported collecting 6.2% less revenue in the month of March, which really only partially relates to COVID-19 because the impact of the pandemic it wasn't a full month. So there's an expectation at the state level of the great impact this will have on revenue. And they expect that April will be a very difficult month as well, because that's when tax filing usually is, and where the state would see money that they're expecting not to see. And finally, PESERS recently issued a statement, just wanted to clarify for budgetary purposes for school districts that the current movement in financial markets will not have an impact on the employer contribution rates for the 2020-2021 school year. The rate next year that was previously set at 34.51% remains, and any changes will likely be in the future years, if any. Thank you.
Thank goodness for small favors. Mr. Hidalgo, Council Rock Education Foundation update, please.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bialik. I have no new updates since the April 2nd meeting. The April 20th meeting we would have had with the foundation this Monday was postponed. The only thing that the president of the Education Foundation asked me to remind everybody is the October 8th golf outing that's going to be at Spring Mill Country Club this year, I guess, and that's all I have.
Thanks, Mr. Hidalgo. You shouldn't confuse me with Mr. Bialik. His beard is much darker.
I shaved.
Ms. McKee, I believe you're doing the MBIT update?
That's correct, Mr. Block. Thank you. MBIT Executive Council held a virtual meeting on April the 13th, at which time we received an update from the director on MBIT's continuity of education plan and their status of distance learning. And like teachers and support staff in Council Rock, the MBIT team is working hard to utilize all available technology and come up with some very creative and engaging lessons for their students as well. Among the motions approved at that meeting were the draft calendar for next year, a 5-year service agreement for fire alarm systems, and payment for an emergency replacement of a main water line pressure valve, which blew. And then finally, an item very closely related to our discussion of finances here in Council Rock. Mrs. Marcel and I, on behalf of Council Rock and in coordination with other council members, we have made a request to reopen the MBIT budget to explore any potential savings we may find. The budget had been approved on March 9th, when obviously things looked quite different than they do today. It's expected that this item will come before the executive committee at our next meeting on May 11th. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Ms. McKee. And that's great work to ensure that everybody's looking at the impact of what we're dealing with. I'm going to assume that there's no policy committee update.
That's correct.
And with that, we'll move to the finance committee. And Ms. Marcel, I believe you're giving that update.
Thank you, Mr. Block. The Finance Committee met as part of the joint committee meeting last Thursday, April 16th. Mr. Stone provided an update on the impact of COVID-19 on Council Rock's finances, which included an update on our current year projections and an explanation of how it will likely affect our 2020 to 2021 budget development. Mr. Stone, would you like to add anything to this?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Okay. I guess we'll move to our consent agenda items.
Yep.
I move to approve consent agenda items B through H as contained in the attachments to this agenda.
Second.
Mr. Byler, quick on the seconds tonight. Are there any questions? Are there any objections? All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any against, say nay. Madam Secretary, note that the motion passes with unanimous consent. And if we could go to letter I, Ms. Marceau.
I move to approve the disposal of district vans number 3 and 5 because the cost to repair exceeds the value of the vehicles.
Second.
Second.
Violet. Mr. Stone, any comment?
These two vehicles are at the end of their useful life, and they were beyond repairing. So we elected, rather than to try to have these vehicles repair at a cost greater than their salvage value, to just simply scrap them. So we're asking that they be disposed of in accordance with board procedure. And the district has already initiated the purchase of replacement vehicles so that we are not without those vehicles in our fleet.
Thank you, Mr. Stone. Are there any questions for Mr. Stone? Any objections? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Madam Secretary, please note that the motion passes with unanimous consent. And I've had a request from Mr. Tate to take letter J, please.
Thank you, Mr. Block. Yes, I move to approve the resolution for statewide charter school funding reform.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. McKee. Mr. Stone, you want to give us a quick overview of that?
Certainly. Many other school districts in the state have approved similar resolutions calling on the legislature to approve reform to the state's charter school funding formula, which is the original funding formula that was developed when this legislation was approved in 1997. So it is very, very old. And the resolution before you speaks only to changing the funding formula. This has evolved into a state mandate that is purely funded by the local taxpayers. The state does not share in the costs for charter schools in any way. I recently looked up the Council Rock information regarding our funding, which has been increasing over the years. And we are now, for special education students, the 7th highest in the state for those that filed a state report with PDE. In conjunction with the discussion that we've had about finances, this was the first year that I had to increase the budget as part of 2021 budget development because the costs have been increasing greater than what we've been able to accommodate in our budget. So certainly funding relief would be very helpful right now. It would not negatively impact Council Rock staff or programs if relief were to be approved by the legislature, which is why the administration recommends approving this resolution tonight.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Stone. Are there any questions? Does anybody have any comment? Excellent. Any objections? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay.
Thank you.
Ms. Marcel, if you could read personnel actions K, please.
I move to approve the personnel actions as contained in the attachments to this agenda.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Bialik. Are there any questions for Ms. Taylor? Any objections? All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. With that, Mr. Salomon, the floor is yours for the Facilities Committee update.
Hey, good evening once again. So we met as a part of the joint committee meeting last week. Doug Taylor briefed us on Rolling Hills is back up and running with much, not much, with added COVID related safety measures put in place there, including a industrial hygienist who checks temperatures and checks on the well-being of the workforce as they work through the day. Fortunately, we've seen an increase of workers come back to the site, and the site is up and running. Happy to see that that is where we are with that. Couple of things we're going to talk about further on is some rejections of the movement of a mover, and that's due to the stalling of Rolling Hills to some degree. So I think that basically covers it, and obviously the turf issue was readily discussed earlier too as well. So with that, I move to approve the consent agenda items B as contained in the attachments to this agenda.
Second.
Are there any questions for Mr. Taylor or Mr. Salomon?
You know, I have a question for Mr. Taylor, just out of curiosity. So we have testing on site, or you say just temperatures or testing?
No, we have a questionnaire on the health of a worker as they come on the site, and then we have a temperature that we check to make sure they're within a certain parameter, and that is to enter the site. There's no actual testing that's being taken.
Do we know if any workers have contracted the illness?
I will say that we on Monday started with about 20 employees, and all 20 checked in fine. Temperatures were fine. There was no history of association with anyone that tested positive. No one in their family was positive. They didn't travel out of the country. They had all reasons to be on site. And on Tuesday, we had about 30, and they all checked in fine. And today we were at where we were prior to the state shutdown, of right around 40 people on site, all working in separate areas, using frequent washing stations for hands, wearing face masks, gloves, and practicing social distancing, and not leaving the site for lunch. So once they check in the morning, they are there until the end of the day, and it's going very well.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Taylor?
Hey, Doug, I just want to follow up with what Mark just said. Is there a protocol, and I'm sure there is there a protocol in place if one of these workers have symptoms, get a test, how and what could be done, and how can that affect what we're doing over there, and then what's in place for something like that?
Yeah, so obviously if someone were to have a temperature that exceeded what the guidelines are, they would not be permitted to enter the site. Secondly, if someone were to test positive, we would shut the site down for at least a day and make sure that we disinfect all the touch surfaces and the facility prior to the contractors returning. Again, the one thing I didn't mention is we do daily disinfect the toilet rooms and the areas where the contractors are entering and exiting touch surfaces to some degree as well.
And I'll just add to that real quickly that should we have a positive test, knock on wood, we won't for many reasons, but should we would also be in direct contact with the Bucks County Health Department, Dr. Dave Damster, the director of that, and he has been a tremendous resource to the Council Rock School District and to districts from throughout the county. So we would lean on his counsel and expertise there as well.
Are there any further questions? Are there any objections? All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Please note the motion passes with unanimous consent. And if you could continue with letter C, Mr. Salomon.
Letter C, I move to ratify the April 9th, 2020 authorization of the continued construction of the Council Rock High School North Walt Snyder Stadium Athletic Field Improvements Project, which was halted by the state of Pennsylvania's cease of construction order effective March 19th, 2020 at 8 p.m. The authorization is provided in compliance with the Pennsylvania Department of Education guidelines due to the critical nature of the project completion as it relates to the impact of student safety, educational programming, and the financial impacts to the district.
Need a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Bialik. I know there's been a lot of conversation about turf, and more importantly, there's an extreme amount of activity on social media and online. The turf project at North started many months ago. It's a project that has been on Mr. Taylor's capital planning book for probably long before we even started talking about doing other turf projects. And it's something that we put off over time, trying to get the most out of that field and be as responsible with the district's resources as we could. So, you know, I want the public to ensure that they've got the best information. The timing of the start is really unfortunate, and I can understand how it could look bad. But the reality is this project has been in the works for quite a long time. It was stopped as a result of the state mandate and is back online as a result of another governor mandate that gave the districts the ability to go back and continue construction projects. Mr. Taylor, do you want to comment on this motion at all? I didn't mean to take any of your thunder, but I think it's really important, given what's online and given people's perceptions, that this is not something that got snuck in by any means.
Sure. Yeah, no thunder taken. You can have it all you want. Yeah, the project was planned for, as you're aware, immediately after graduation and finishing by mid-August, so that the facility would be ready for the return of students for the 2021 school year. When the state shut down projects, this contractor who was coming to ours was shut down on other projects. He gave us the ability to bring him on board. Basically first come, first serve relative to what project he would go to next. And that would clearly have a domino effect on when he moves to a project after that and so on. So we had the ability to get him in. He is practicing social distancing and other COVID safety precautions on site. So by starting early, we are still looking at an end of July, early August completion date for this contractor. We're fortunate to have him here and fortunate to be able to avoid any conflict with the start of the next school year. Short of bringing him in early, we would have been at the mercy of when he returned to his other projects and when he could finally get to our project. And an extension of time is certainly warranted with the global pandemic. So we're very fortunate, and we're looking at a late July, early August completion date.
Thank you for that, Mr. Taylor. Are there any comments or any questions for Mr. Taylor? Can I ask you? Okay, go ahead, Mr. Hidalgo. I can see you. Others, if you just please raise your hand and I'll come to you after Mr. Hidalgo.
I just wanted to thank Doug for explaining the whole project, because I had a lot of concerns, and this is something that, when asked to make an immediate approval, I had a hard time. I said no, because not the safety issues, but the fact that this might have been an opportunity for us to reanalyze the project, given the extraordinary circumstances in which we were in. And I thought I didn't want to make a decision on the, decisions are made, but didn't want to push it up without giving the opportunity to look at the whole, but I totally understand where Doug and the administration came from, trying to secure the safety of the of the students, and they think that it's spent. I just wanted to see a little bit more analysis and maybe, looking at the GMAX ratings and seeing if we could squeeze out more of that field, or could we get rid of the turf? I'm sorry, the track, and look at and maybe there's a legal reason why we couldn't do that, but given the circumstances of the shutdown, maybe there was other avenues. But so I just wanted to make sure that it was reflective on the record that I didn't want to do that. So I apologize for dragging it out. Since we talked about the South Turf first, that kind of changed the whole agenda by going that way, and maybe I wouldn't need to have pulled this out of consent agenda. But any questions are almost in retrospect at this point. So I just appreciate everybody and what they're trying to do. I just want to make sure the record reflects what I thought at the time. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Hidalgo. Sorry, go ahead, Dr. Frazier.
Thanks, Mr. Block. Mr. Taylor, I was just going to ask you, for the sake of the community who's tuning in or will be tuning in, can you explain that piece a little bit about the track surface? Because I do know that we have legitimate safety concerns with the track surface, and then how the bid was actually constructed from a scoreboard standpoint, some of the difficulty.
Yeah, it drug on a little there. I lost a little bit of what you were, but the project was bid as a turf replacement along with a replacement of the all-weather surface on the track. And we actually have some safety concerns with the track. There are multiple cracks in the track that have opened up that were pretty sizable, and we've repaired them a few times, and they've come back each time we've repaired them. So part of this project was not only to replace a tired turf, but also to replace an all-weather surface on the track that's problematic, and to the point where we actually have to mill and overlay some of the asphalt underlayment under the wearing surface. So that really is contiguous with the rest of this project. There is perimeter drainage along the turf field that we will add that will be different than what the current drainage is there. We will improve the drainage, and that kind of trench drain detail runs the length of the track up against it. So the right time to do the work at the track is with this project. It was always intended to team up with these with the other project, and the timing is appropriate for the all-weather surface. And I know that there are some issues with the south track, and that is something that we will look to address, hopefully with some monies next summer as well.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Are there any more questions for Mr. Taylor? Or are there any comments? Dr. Thorwood, sorry, see your hand up.
Yeah. Just because I get the sneaky suspicion people think we're approving this project tonight. Doug, Robert, Bill, I don't care who. Someone voice when this was actually approved. We voted for this already. This was approved. The contracts were written and stamped. I think it's important for the public to hear when that happened.
Yeah.
It is not tonight.
That's correct. This project was approved on January 23rd. This was a project that was not associated with the facility improvement projects. This is actually part of the capital improvement budget. So this was not one of the projects from bonds. This is actually part of the summer capital project monies, and this was approved as an early capital project to move forward here. So that is a good clarifier. Thank you, Mike.
I just want people to realize that this was voted and started pre-COVID, significantly pre-COVID, and it's important to know that. If I was voting on it now and trying to approve it, I'd be a no, but we've already done this. So
to add to that, Mike, I'm sorry, to add to that, once we approved this, and the reason we approved it in January is so the contractor could begin to order the products that he needs to finish that project this summer. So it immediately put into works submittals and the order of turf and the other products that he would need. So even if we were to, after learning of the COVID and the global challenges and the economic impact, we would have been left with likely a pile of product on site that we couldn't have used and would not have received the full credit back from the contractor to terminate the project. So we were really into this, as you said, before anyone knew what was coming.
Okay, I just wanted that on the record. Thanks.
Mr. Hidalgo?
Yeah, let me make sure I'm not on mute. Yeah, so I appreciate you mentioning South Track, Doug, because that too is something that I run a lot, and I can see that it needs some attention. I don't know how old that is or how it compares to the other track we're doing at the stadium, but I appreciate you mentioning that, because if you're saying that's hopeful for a next summer project, that's also very hopeful that that's in line. But I also was going to think about the tennis court matched with the South Track. We just repaired that, and there's long-term issues with the fault line or whatever you want to call it there, some soil issues that you might want to replace that. Maybe we would look at the South Track, coupling that with the field instead. I'm not trying to complicate things, but if things go down the road and we have to rebid this, maybe we can look at different options. But I appreciate that you explained everything out there for us. And,
Mr. Salomon, you have a comment?
Yeah, Mr. Block, I have one point of comment and one question to Doug. The point of comment will be that as we quickly learned with the Rolling Hills, as we got back to work with that, we did see an increase due to COVID because we have to put things in place. I want the public to be aware of that. That what was budgeted is increased a little bit there, and we'll be moving forward in the new world we live in. So that Doug's got to do the little extra work on each one of these projects to ensure that we cover our bases with CDC and OSHA guidelines. My question, Doug, you pointed out the safety issue that we found at North. Did anything jump out at you that we should have caught this sooner? And what did we learn from that moving forward with this project and the project we're going to have at South?
So we were aware that the storm drains were at an elevation to us for a project would want it to have been in a lower elevation. So we, in our project where they used plywood, actually specified in the base bid a 1/2 inch thick steel plate over those existing openings. So after we open this up and lower those storm drains, we will actually put a 1/2 inch thick steel plate beneath the stone to ensure that we don't have that problem down the road. And we will also get the bottom of the, you get the stone down to such an elevation that when we put the turf product over top that you won't know that those structures are under there. So we will absolutely improve that. That's something that we did during our investigations, but we never saw, opened it up and saw the plywood beneath it. That was a bit of a surprise. The South Turf field is entirely different in that we're not putting a field when that does happen. It is in a green area that didn't have a natural turf field in place with drainage that was there to facilitate that field. We'll be putting in all new herringbone drainage beneath the field that is diverted to storm drainage off to the perimeter of the field, and that'll be a nice clean design.
Thanks, Doug. I always appreciate it. Thank you.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Taylor? Are there any comments? I'm going to ask for a roll call vote here, please, Madam Secretary.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Denise Brooks,
Yes.
Marianne McKee,
Yes.
Joseph Hidalgo,
no,
Kristen Marcel. Kristen Marcel,
Yes.
Ed Solomon,
Yes.
Andy Block,
Yes.
Mark Bialik,
Yes.
Ed Tate,
Yes.
Mike Thorwart.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Let the record show that that motion passes 8-1. And again, just to be really clear for the public, this vote was not to approve anything. This vote was just to recommence a project that's already been in place. So with that, can we go to letter number D, Mr. Salomon?
Yes, I'd move to approve this Council Rock Star Center project bid number 19-52, including select value added alternatives to the contractors as attached to this agenda at a total cost not to exceed $10,632,500, and that's subject to audit.
Second.
Thank you. I think that was Mr. Tate on the second, if I heard correctly. I know Dr. Frazier touched on this earlier. I think we're all very familiar with this project from committee. Are there any questions for Mr. Taylor or any comments from the board? If you'll raise your hand in the chat there, I'll call on you. Dr. Thorwart.
Just one, Bill, we've already borrowed the money for this, so we are committed again on this one, correct?
We have sufficient funds in our borrowed monies to complete Rolling Hills and to continue on the Star Center, but only enough to complete those two projects.
Understood.
So that's correct.
Understood. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Sorry, Mr. Bialik.
Yeah, Mike, that was a really good point that you brought up, because I talked about bond financing earlier in regard to the South Turf. And again, I don't want people to think that we're moving forward with these projects and not doing the other projects, but we've already borrowed this money. It's already been in place. So it's vitally important that we move forward with it. And we also need a place for these kids. We're really running on borrowed time with the facility that we have. The LSAC facility has been very gracious, continually extending that lease. So this is not only a great facility for these kids, but necessary.
Mr. Taylor, looks like you have a comment.
Yes, Andy, I just want to be clear to the board. Earlier today, I had a very good virtual meeting with Northampton Township just to discuss a lot of loose ends relative to the approvals of this project. With the COVID-19 and inability to meet and deal with governing authorities, it definitely has challenged some of the pieces of this. And primarily, there's a component called the sewer planning module, which is us demonstrating we have sufficient capacity on site for the number of kids that would be in that new facility. And we have sufficient capacity as the site exists. However, DEP is still requiring that we go through with the full process for this module that we have to go through, and it requires approval by the township. Then it goes off to DEP, and then it goes to the city of Philadelphia for final signature, and it takes some time, and it is really a requirement before we can start some of the site work. So out of concern for its impact to the schedule, we did reach out to the contractors late today to let them know that we'd be getting a later start than we anticipated, but we still want to ensure that we finish this project on time. The contractors have all agreed if we start this project no later than the beginning of July, preferably before, for certain. We want to get site work started as quickly as possible, but the drop dead date would be end of June, beginning of July, and still look to get an August completion. We have included in tonight's agenda, which is for you to sign. It's not an actual motion. There's a no cost change order, which basically commits each one of the contractors entering into an agreement with us tonight to start the project no later than the date that I mentioned and still finish this project on time. The only way we can change contractual timelines is through a change order. So I want to be clear that we worked with the township today. We have to resolve, get the final documentation for the land development agreement, for the stormwater agreement, the escrow agreement, which is the Playgate I'll work with Bill Stone on, and then ultimately the permit. Everybody is on board to work together to get things started. And and we will still complete this project on time. But that change order, which is a no-cost change order, changing only the contract time, which is primarily the start date, still contractually obligates the contractors to finish on time. So I just wanted to be clear that that was taken care of.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor, and hopefully there's not too many papers for me to docu-sign tonight. Mr. Hidalgo's got another comment or question.
Yeah. Hi, this one's for Bill Stone. Just wondering, since we already have the money bonded or funded, borrowed, does that tie our hands on this project specifically?
Do you mean that we have to continue because we have the funds borrowed?
Right.
When we borrow the funds, we borrow broadly when we state the purpose of the issuance. So it could be for any capital project, but we have certain requirements that we have to meet with the IRS in order to maintain our tax exempt status of the bonds for the bondholders. And so for that reason, there is a requirement to spend the funds in a timely manner. But specifically to complete the Star Center, if that was your question, the answer to that is no, but we do have to continue spending those funds in sufficient time.
Okay. I'm not questioning. I'm in favor of the Star Center. And then Doug, one question, it's kind of an easy one. How far back, how many fields are we going to lose? Some people were asking me during construction, I guess. Can you get an estimate of how many fields they're going to lose?
I'm going to lose about 2 fields. One of the fields is a field that is not a favorable field. It's along the road. It has a pretty good pitch to it. And there's another field and the softball field. Those are the fields that will be impacted by the project through construction. And then one field will open up next to our building once we complete it. So
okay.
Not a major impact. We will have construction fencing up to separate this from any other fields on site.
All right, thank you. That's all I have.
Any other questions for Mr. Taylor or comments? Are there any objections? All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Madam Secretary, please note that the motion passes with unanimous consent. Mr. Solomon, could you please continue with letter E?
Sure, absolutely. I move to reject all bids received for the Council Rock High School South Tennis Court Restoration Project bid number 19-45, subject to audit.
Second.
Second.
Mark, why don't you just second all of them? I don't think anybody else.
I'm trying to give time.
So this was something that was covered Thursday at our meeting. Cliff notes, Doug?
Yeah, Cliff Notes are, we bid this project as a standalone tennis court project, or we teamed it up with the turf project. And by teaming it up, we saved, the strategy was great. We saved nearly $500,000 when we teamed this up with the turf project. Unfortunately, we're going to probably pause on these things, which I understand. So this standalone project was about $500,000 more. So regardless of what direction we go down the road, these bids would be rejected for sure.
Thank you, Doug. That's pretty straightforward. Are there any questions or comments? Any objections? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Madam Secretary, please note the motion passes with unanimous consent. With that, we'll go to letter F.
All right, Mr. Block, I do have a question. On my version of this, I have a move to approve and a move to reject.
You are looking at an old version. We're looking at the.
I'm sorry, they're 2 separate things. So we're approving a certain line of budget bids and we're disapproving another one. Is that correct, Doug?
Yeah, approval and rejection of capital improvement projects.
All right, I'll start with the top one. Here we go. I move to approve the capital improvement project bid numbers 19-42, 19-46, and 19-48 as contained in the attachment to the agenda at a total cost not to exceed $249,124, subject to audit and solicitor's review.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Marcel.
The second part is I move to reject the capital improvement project bid numbers 19-41, 19-44, and 19-47 as contained in the attachment to the agenda, subject to audit and solicitor's review.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Bialik. Let the record show we're taking these together. We're okay with that. Ms. Aronson, yes? Even though we moved and seconded twice, we're okay to vote together?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you. Are there any questions? We went over this on Thursday as well. Are there any questions for Mr. Taylor or any comments? Any objections? All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. Madam Secretary, please note the motion is passed with unanimous consent. We'll move to the last one, letter G, please, for approval of capital improvement projects.
Correct. I move to approve the change order number 1 to the Land Tech Group Incorporated in the credit amount of $28,000 for project number 19-48, which is a softball field improvements, subject to audit.
Second.
It's a credit. I'm not sure anybody will have any objections, but are there any questions or comments? Any objections? All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Please note that the motion passes with unanimous consent. As we come to the end of our meeting agenda, I'd like to circle back out of our commitment to all of the public comment. And Ms. O'Grady, hopefully you've gotten a glass of water or some tea and honey. And if you could take us through the last 11 public comments, that would be great. And from there, we'll go to new business, old business, and board comment.
Sure thing. I will pick up where I left off with commentary made by Mr. John McGinley. A moment. And I'm continuing where I left off. For the past 20 years, I feel like I have been living in 2 separate school districts, the wrong side of 413. From what I understand in talking to friends and colleagues in the district, everything at the high school is supposed to be the same: curriculum, grading, activities. Why does it not apply to the athletic facilities? Do the right thing. Keep hope south. Enough has been taken away from them recently. Go forward with this turf project at South. Give them a place for their PE classes. Give them a home field for football, lacrosse, field hockey, like marching band, cheerleaders. Give them the same types of home fields the kids at North have. Baseball and softball can practice outside during the wet springs preseason as well. Do the right thing for the kids at South and for the community. Additionally, be fair to the kids and families at North. Use the turf by teams from South. Use of turf by teams from South limits the use for all kids as well. In trying times, we need leadership. Show leadership needed to create an equitable school district with equitable school district facilities, one that is inclusive of all students. Next, we have a comment by Dylan Bennett. The area of residence, but writes, hello CRSD board members. My name is Dylan Bennett and I've enjoyed playing for Council Rock South soccer program since. There have been some rumors going around that our turf project will be put behind North Turf renovation. On behalf of my fellow teammates, we feel this is very unfair and we have been waiting for a turf field to showcase our game on for a while. Our schools do not have the luxury of a turf field or a swimming pool and feel that we deserve just as much as Council Rock North, let alone the fact that we are one of the newest schools that offer a great education for coming students, but we lack the athletic facilities that other schools have. Having a turf field for our athletics would further boost the confidence of us players, which is very important when getting results on the field. For our school behind a renovation project for our school building is not something we want to hear, as we feel we deserve as Council Rock North. Thank you for listening to what I have to say on this topic, and I hope you will listen to others how we feel on Council Rock South Soccer. Our next comment is from Becky Rice, who resides in the Richboro area. Ms. Rice wrote, South population is growing and yet North getting approved. That is and showing the inequity of North versus South. There should be no any one district. South needs its own fields. The kids are always made to feel inferior to North, and that is not right. South deserves a field as much as North, if not more, as we have waited years for that to happen, while North always gets their games at home. And their home is actually their home. Ours is North, and that is wrong. Please consider opening up the bid and rethinking the idea of turfing South. Thanks. Our next comment is from Scott Burns. Mr. Burns did not state an area of location for which he resides, but writes, Council Rock School Board, good afternoon. I hope this finds you and your family safe and healthy. In these extraordinary times we are now living, many long hours, the Council Rock School Board has invested and continues to invest to provide normalcy and enrichment for our children and our families. Part of this enrichment is not only educational and social, but physical as well. And in an environment where social distancing has become a basic necessity, providing a venue that allows our students to regain some balance, both in their physical and mental health, is more than ever. Additionally, providing a new turf demonstrates a commitment to our community. This commitment would recognize that virtually everyone has had to make great sacrifices, many even greater, for the well-being of our neighbors. Building this, physical and mental health is more important than ever. Providing a new turf demonstrates a commitment to our community. Recognize that virtually everyone I apologize. Our generation has been asked to make more sacrifices for the greater good than we have had in many generations. This has created uncommon opportunity for the school board to be a leader in the other time. This is your moment to decide that even when things may look impossible, Council Rock understands that their role as a leader is vitally important to the community when it needs it most. Now, not next year, is the time to build something that is for the better good. I ask you for action of the Council Rock South turf field. Thank you for your consideration. Our next comment is from Geist. Mr. Geist does not mention the area from which he resides, but writes, I will make this short and sweet. Do the right thing and turf South again. Our next comment comes from Anita Wilshinsky. Anita does not mention the area from which she is, to whom it may concern. I'm writing to you regarding the future of the turf field at Council Rock South. I know it will be on the agenda during tonight's meeting. Please consider our kids and the hundreds of families that were waiting for this project to finally take place. It is not fair to our kids to change the turf at North and leave our kids without turf, a stadium, and proper facilities for so many different sports. Parents and kids of South are being treated like the poor stepchild of North. Why is that? I don't want to hear again North facilities. It is not the same. Both schools, although friendly, compete with each other and definitely don't feel that their home games are truly home when they have to play at North. Also, having senior night at South would be a more memorable end to one's athletic high school career. Please consider our kids in making today's decision. I would like to believe that you'll be making the right decision so that our kids don't feel like their school is inferior to North. Our next comment comes from Matthew Walters of the Holland area. Mr. Walters writes, Dear board members, I express my full support of the CRHS South Synthetic Turf Field project. Please move forward with this project, which is greatly needed for not only the students at South, but for the whole Council Rock community. Thank you. Our next comment is from a student with the last name of Coker, but did not mention the first name. Did not mention the area of which the student resides. Dear board, my parents told me that you have decided not to turf CRS, but rather returf North. I'm in 7th grade at Holland Middle School. I was looking forward to going into high school and having to play lacrosse on a turf field at my school. Having one turf field to share between North and South is not enough, and we always end up canceling games because fields get rained out or are unavailable. I feel like the North kids are always put before us. I just want to let you know how disappointed I am in the school's decision, and am asking you for giving the turf field at South. Thank you. Our next comment is from Anthony Badesa. Anthony does not list the area of which he resides. He writes, pretty crazy to see North's getting its second turf when CR South again is left in the dark. Fair is fair. We want a turf field at South. We pay taxes too. Turf being declined for South is unacceptable. Next, we hear from Kristen Doyle of the Holland area. Ms. Doyle writes, it is a travesty that we even have to petition for a turf field for our CR South students and community, as it should have already been approved and done with. It is time for this. Next, we hear from Andrew Rosenfeld of the Holland area. Andrew writes, Dear Council Rock School District Board, hello, my name is Andrew Rosenfeld, and I'm currently a junior at Council Rock High School South. Today, I reach out to you as the captain of the varsity soccer team, a student advisory representative who visits your meetings frequently, and a member of the community. Recently, I have heard that South's turf project is getting canceled. To me, this is extremely upsetting. For years now, a turf at South has been in the talks. When I heard about the school receiving one in my sophomore year, I was ecstatic. Finally, I believed that my friends and I would have a chance to play on a brand new, amazing turf field. But now, all of a sudden, Council Rock North is once again being put above Council Rock South. Although I understand that turf needs to be redone every now and then, there is no reason why it should be prioritized over South gaining turf. It makes me emotional thinking about how me, my friends, and the future students of Council Rock South will not get the opportunity to play on our own turf field. Home field advantage is something existent in every sport, game, etc. Going out of my own field in my own team colors is a feeling like no other, but my classmates and I haven't had the chance in the last years. I'm hoping that my message, as well as the countless other voices from Council Rock South, will make you rethink when the decision is being made. Whether I'm even in school for the turf, I still would like to have my voice heard and to make an impact on my school. Please reconsider. Our next comment is from Penny Rosenfeld, also from the Holland area. Ms. Rosenfeld writes, Dear board members, I would like to start this email by thanking you for your service to our school district. This is an unpaid and time-consuming position, and one that at times can seem quite thankless. I was a member of the Parent Advisory Committee for several years, and my son is currently a member of the Student Advisory Board for South, so I am familiar with the breadth of issues you deal with. I know you have been inundated with emails over the last couple of days regarding the turf field at South. I can understand that budget may be an issue, and with the current state of affairs, some fear to take on the project, but I believe a change of course at this point would be a big mistake. The field was approved and should have been budgeted for. I was under the impression that the North Field redo was also at jeopardy. Since that field has already been ripped up, I guess someone was smart enough to, so there is no turning back. To those board members that are in the South District, we elect you with the assumption that you will fight to do what is best for our schools and our students, as well as ensure that there is a balance of resources between schools. Having had athletes that have gone through the high school and one who is currently attending, our fields are embarrassing. I can only hope that you will take all the comments you are hearing tonight into consideration and that the decision has not already been made. Our final comment of the evening is from Dr. Wall. Dr. Wall does not indicate the area of residence in which he lives. To whom it may I would like to urge the board to positively consider approval for turf fields at Council Rock South High School. These fields are desperately needed, not only for Cruza, but also FC Bucks, but for the Northampton community at large. As you are aware, there is a significant need for more practice and game options for Cruza FC Bucks. The current teams are currently forced to practice at multiple different locations, some of which are a significant drive from the community. Practice times are switched with limited notice to teams. The coaches, including our coach, have done a tremendous job to arrange for practice fields and times, often at the last minute, and are doing everything they possibly can do for their teams. These coaches make a tremendous and much appreciated commitment to the soccer club, their players, and to the Northampton community. They need and deserve to have better, higher quality fields to best develop their players. The current players for Cruza, FC Bucks, as well as future generations of players would greatly benefit from upgraded facilities and more options for practice or games. This would ultimately result in even better training for the club's players, which will allow them to become more complete and well-rounded players, giving them their best opportunity to play at the high school or collegiate level if that is their wish. I strongly urge you to approve funding for a new turf field at Council Rock South High School. And by doing so, you would be doing a tremendous service to the soccer club, as well as the Northampton community at large. Thank you very much for your consideration of this matter and taking the time to read this email. And that concludes the comments.
Thank you, Ms. O'Grady. Appreciate the time put in today. With that, we're going to move to new business from the board. Is there any new business from the board? If you have any, please raise your hand in the chat. I see none. Is there any old business? I see none. Is there any board comment? Mr. Salomon. You might be on mute. You are on mute.
Here I go. Sorry about that. Doug, I don't really want to put you back on the spot, but I don't know if it was mentioned during the course of our discussion about the turf this evening. And I know it was taken off the agenda. Can you mention how much this project all in and how it was divided up throughout the whole amount of the project and how it was broken up, just so our public that's listening and be watching this knows exactly the amount that this was being discussed?
Sure. There were two bids, and there were three. Just for clarity, there were three turf manufacturers or three turf contractors at the mandatory pre-bid. That's been confirmed since we had the discussion last week. Of those three, two did submit numbers. Of those two, the base bid of the low bidder is $2,198,000. That is without lighting, without the scoreboard, without power on the site. The addition of that power is $950,000. That's the Musco site lighting, that's the scoreboard, that's power from the building's electrical room to get to the field to provide power to those components. Then there was a deduct of $29,000 to take the athletic netting off the ends of the fields. Based on the bids, we wanted to see those savings. And that resulted in a $3,119,000 bid to construct the stadium minus the bleachers for $3,000 and the stadium pieces. That is all of the fencing, that's the flagpole, that is the scoreboard, that's the sidewalks, and rough in for future amenities if that were to happen down the road. So $3,119,000. And then there was an alternate for the tennis courts, which changes the low bidder. One of those bids was 1,230,000. The other was 1,076,000, as compared to the 1.5 if they were to bid individually. So that's how those numbers break out.
Doug, again, I appreciate it. And I think it's important to drive those numbers home, because as we talked about earlier, this situation that we're walking into is something that's right in front of us and right in front of our eyes. You know, $3 million is a lot of money, whether you put it into a turf or you put it into books. And I think getting this out to the public tonight, for me, was most important. I appreciate the work that's done by this administration and this board, and we have some work to do. Thank you, Mr. Block.
Thank you, Mr. Salomon. Is there any further board comment? Okay, with that, I will adjourn our meeting. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.